Don't take this the wrong way. How come every singular new champ looks LGBTQ? So I'll trust that that's coming in good faith because you said don't take this the wrong way. My answer for you on that topic is something that I think a lot, especially a lot of American gamers, especially older American gamers who skew conservative, is that you might have a restricted view of what a woman or a man looks like. And that bias might contribute to you thinking that any character who doesn't embody your exact view of femininity or masculinity would look, say, LGBTQ or whatever you're saying there, right? But it turns out there is a large variety of body types for both men and women, and facial structures and looks for both men and women that are worth expressing in a game like League of Legends. And so that would perhaps be my response to that. And this is coming from like as an example, excuse me. As an example, like a lot of like old gamers, right? Like they view like female characters in games as like having to have a specific body type, and it's like surprising to them when they deviate from that body type, right? And I would say it's just like, well, I would argue that games historically have done a bad job at capturing the variety of body types that humans have, especially in regards to female characters. And I don't think just because a character has, you know, a different body type or a different look necessarily means they're going to be a certain way. So basically, I guess you've been trained through past media to perhaps restrict your view of what a person looks like. Sorry if it's asked, but do you genuinely think Briar is unplayable in high elo, or is it just a case of community hive mind? I think compared to other options, you have to work much harder on Briar to get the same results. And so like if you're playing Briar in high MMR, if you wanted an easier time to get the same results, you could play Nocturne or Vi or Graves. Actually, Graves is kind of hard, but like, you see what I'm getting at? And so it's not that she's like useless. It's that she is very, very punishing and hard to play when your opponents know what they're doing. And so you are forced to have perfect decision making, which is not something that other characters are forced to have. It's like a Kha'Zix player doesn't need to have perfect decision making, because if he ever screws up, he can hit R and leave, right? And so I do think Briar is viable in high MMR. If you're really good and you make really good decisions, you can make her work. Logan Jungle is an example of someone who makes her work. The catch, though, is that for all that effort and all that hardship, there's probably other characters who will like do just as well without like the downsides that she brings. So yeah, I wouldn't say she's useless. I wouldn't say she's non-viable in high MMR. I would say that for most players, though, she is weak in high MMR compared to other options, and you have to work a lot harder to get things out of her in high MMR. But if you do put the work in and you do have really, really good decision making, Briar's got some very, very powerful stuff that she can offer a team. She's a pretty crazy front line. She can go insane with healing depending on the situation. She has a targeted stun. Targeted stuns are just good. She has pretty good early game ganks. She's got global presence if you play it right and you have a team to play around, right? Like there's a number of things that Briar can do in high MMR that are pretty nice, but she's just really, really punishing if you ever screw up in a way that most other characters you're playing against aren't going to be. That's how painful it is to lose early game on Briar because it's non-recoverable. Yeah, Briar has a hard time when she's behind, like a really, really hard time. Now, that said, so this is something I could just kind of think about the game. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. There's a lot of characters who are really good at going in and being snowbally while going in. And then if they get behind, they suck, right? And I think one interesting thing about those characters is most people who play them, including myself, don't consider, well, if I'm behind and can't go in, what if I just peeled? Briar's like this, Leona's like this, Vi's like this. It's kind of a thought of like, if you're losing on Briar, Leona, Vi, instead of trying to, hunt down the enemy AD carry, you know, assuming there's someone on your team who's doing decently, why don't you become a stun bot for your AD carry or a stun bot for your mid laner, right? And just sit on top of them and make it so they can never be approached. I think that's something that, like, legitimately, in a number of situations, Briar might actually be decent at, but it's hard to just not want to go push the go in button. You're better off dying and engaging a team fight than being a bad peeler? Well, yeah, if the engage is good, right? Just because you die doesn't mean the engage is bad. There's a lot of times where you die and it's a good engage, which is something else to think about with Briar. Assassin Briar is more fun than Bruiser Briar. It's definitely fun. It was definitely more viable, too, in higher MMRs because you could, like, you know, one-shot people. It was also a little degen, which is why we moved away from it. I think Briar, like, kind of wants to live and run around and heal and stuff, which the Assassin Briar was a lot more reliant on just one-shotting. So this is definitely a Titanic game. I feel like I play Briar better when I build Blade of the Ruined King, by the way. I think I'm a bit better at the damage playstyle of her. With her Q proccing on hit and W reactivation, I'm surprised Triforce isn't more popular on Briar. I always thought she'd be a Triforce user, but I don't know, Triforce just isn't what it used to be. Triforce, like the old days of Triforce, like Triforce gave you good cooldown reduction, it gave you good move speed, and now it gives you neither of those things. Like, what is Triforce now? It only gives you 15 ability haste. That's not a lot. It doesn't even give you passive movement speed anymore. Yeah, like, current Triforce just isn't it compared to the old one. To make Triforce work on a character like Briar, I think you just need a lot more stats. Versus Blade of the Ruined King kind of gives you those stats. Plus, it's very expensive, too. No longer gets tons of damage. No, Triforce isn't all that amazing of an item anymore. We took off a lot of the things that made it a good thing for bruisers. And so now it's a lot more specialized. You have to be a very certain type of bruiser to like it. Like, if you really, really, really like Sheen, right? Like, Trinity Force can still be a good item. But it used to be kind of like an item almost every bruiser could buy. It's less the case. So, Zyra Jungle is an example of a character who has low agency. Zyra Jungle is viable in terms of win rate, and can pop off and can succeed and can clear the jungle and all those things. But Zyra, to be truly a viable jungler, likely needs to have a meaningfully higher win rate than someone like, say, Lee Sin, because of the fact that she doesn't really have a lot of response to adversity, right? If I go invade her jungle like I did, there's not much she can do. If I'm zoning her off of... if we're zoning off her Baron, there's not much she can do. A character like Lee Sin, in those situations, have a lot more options at his disposal to actually, like, come out on top in those interactions. And so Zyra will tend to need to just on more average win more games than a character like Lee Sin to feel viable in the jungle, given her lack of agency and optionality in the role. Despite the fact that she does win games in the jungle and can clear and, you know, is viable there.